Yes, live with Barry Ritholtz on a Friday. It is great to see you. People have been clamoring. They've been asking, where's Ritholtz? And you're here to save the day.
I love a good clamor. Absolutely.
Has it been a hell of a clamor for you? And now look at you. It's December. It's the end of the year.
Cold.
Talk about with you. We could talk about the year that passed, and we could talk about what's coming up. I mean, we generally always talk about that, but there certainly are plenty of issues to talk about. And I want to start with the prices of things.
Well, before we talk prices, can I just point out that it was 24 degrees in New York this morning, proving that global warming is a hoax? I mean, can we just get that out of the way?
Come on. Now you're going to force me to talk about some of the issues around that you can certainly speak to, because I always want to talk about climate and energy. And first of all, energy prices are going up overall. Is that fair to say for Americans and other energy payers across Europe and elsewhere?
What's amazing is how the rest of the world has so completely embraced sustainable and alternative energy forms, and we have finally reached the point where solar, wind, geothermal is cheaper, much cheaper than coal, cheaper than oil, and somewhat cheaper than gas. And it's just mind-blowing that we've tacked in the other direction. If you want to reduce prices, because I know you want to talk about inflation, if you want to reduce energy costs, well, cheap, sustainable, renewable energy is the winner. And it's just astonishing to me that Grandpa doesn't get that. They're so stuck in the 1950s. It's amazing.
He does get it. Business people get it. Capitalists get it. It's just that the oil and gas industry lobbies them otherwise. And there is this element of culture where renewable energy and battery-powered cars are for pussies. I mean, you know what I'm saying? There is a cultural idea around that it is somehow weak or cuck-like or feminine to not burn fossil fuels. And,
well, we've all seen the big pickups with the truck nuts and the exhaust pipes that are there, like, to own the libs. 60% of the new cars sold in China last month were EVs or hybrids. I mean, that's an amazing number. And we're not, instead of competing with China, we're competing with this ridiculous idealized version of the United States in the 1950s. Post-war, we were the undisputed superpower in the world. And, I love the quote from Ray Dalio, which is, and he's talking about investors, but it's true for everybody. The first job of investors is to understand reality and to deal with it. And I get the sense that a lot of policymakers either don't understand reality or just refuse to deal with it. We're trapped in somebody else's therapy session where they're just discussing denial. And it's incredibly, you want to look forwards. It's hard to look forward when the administration spend so much time looking backwards. If only it was the 1950s. If only it was the 1850s.
But to be clear, the biggest driver of that ideology, I think you agree, is the issue that we have around campaign finance and the stranglehold that the oil and gas industry in particular have on Republicans. And that's it. That's all I want to say.
I mean, the crazy thing is just what a booming business in red states that solar and wind have been. So I have a buddy who runs a farmland fund. Brandon Zick runs Saris Farmland Funds. It's a $2 billion fund, and they're based in the Midwest. It's all U.S. Investing. And part of the process of buying farmland is that farming is a really tough job. You live and die on the weather. You don't know what prices are going to be year out. It's time consuming. It's expensive. It's really tough. So what they do when they buy farmland and then lease it out to farmers, hey, how can we help you be more efficient? How can we help you make the land more productive? So there's some irrigation issues and other things, but they're very big on, hey, how do you feel about putting up a wind farm, putting up a couple of turbines that'll offset all of your electrical costs for the year. How do you feel about taking the least productive slice of your lands and turning it into a solar farm? And Texas is booming with this. Texas has so much solar power, and a lot of these are just middle of the country red states. It's so fascinating how out of step the president is with his own base. It's really amazing to me. At least, and I know you want to talk about AI, that's the one forward-looking thing they seem to be embracing, albeit in a weird roundabout way.
Well, embracing it almost fully, but without regulation, would seem the Republican argument, like everything else, but without regulation. Is that? I think that's a fair way of.
I would take it even further. The Washington Post just had a piece that
other countries are thinking a lot more about being responsible and trying to regulate it. I mean,
right. Europe in particular is much savvier about individual privacy rules, and they just fined Elon Musk for fraud.
Right.
Those blue checks that say you're verified, if you're selling it for $8, well, how is it? How you verified? So it was $150 million fine, or something like that. So yeah, you have 12 billionaires in this cabinet, and you have just a collection of oligarchs with the president's ear. So yeah, maybe it's not a technological look forward. It's more of a who has money that can support my candidates, my campaign, my this, my that.
Let me come back to AI, and let me come back to farming and I want to get to the trade war and the effect tariffs have had on our economy. I guess it's debatable, but my argument or my assertion is, and I don't know much about the economic history of this country, probably a little bit more than some, much less any other country. But let me ask you, is the trade war and this tariff nonsense the worst self-inflicted wound into the American economy ever made in terms of any leader on monetary or fiscal policy? Can you think of anything, any single thing, policy, idea, piece of legislation that damaged the economy or sectors of the economy more than the trade war that this insane man has begun? And seemingly no conservative policy thinkers, economic policy thinkers, think this is a good idea because it's anti-capitalist.
Right. So you have to go back to 1930 and the Smoot-Hartley Act that made the Depression worse by starting a trade war, putting tariffs on. I mean, if you want a policy decision that was as ruinous, I think you got to go back to Vietnam. Was a terrible policy decision that had really significant impact on the economy, not just on global relations. And then, you can make war is such a different example, but when we were attacked on 9/11 and the attack came out of Afghanistan, and it was primarily Saudi Arabian nationals that perpetrated it, pivoting to attack Iraq made no sense. And that was $2 or $3 trillion in costs, lots of deaths on our side as well as the other side. But this is a pretty substantial cell phone. The trade war is a solution in search of a problem. If you want to say China's a bad actor, if you want to say some of the tariffs and some of the rules and some of the restrictions on who could sell what in what country are unfair, well, that's fine. Go address that. But
every previous administration has done that, has said that, and if there were easy solutions for it, then Bush and Biden and Obama would have implemented them. There aren't. There's pain to go around, and it doesn't mean it's going to work. Sorry, go ahead.
So no, basically it's to turn. Well, first of all, we have to preface all this by saying the executive branch, the president, doesn't have the constitutional authority to implement tariffs on his own. That was litigated. The president lost at the trial level. They lost at the first appellate level. It went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court was extremely skeptical of the government's argument. It was pretty much a beatdown. If we had a legitimate Supreme Court, if we didn't have a bunch of hacks and partisans, this should be a 9-0 or an 8-1 decision. As is, I think it's going to be a 6-3 or a 7-2 decision, and all these tariffs will be overturned. And then the president has to either go to Congress or come up with another harebrained scheme of how to get this in. But in the meantime, this takes time. It's a year, right? So we're almost, January 20th is 40 days away, less than 40 days away. So we're almost a year into this entire process. The good news is
it takes time and it does tremendous damage.
It does a lot of damage.
It's done to many markets and many families and individuals and many businesses is real damage. And my understanding is sometimes if you lose a market, it is very hard to get market back. If you lose a client, an account, it's hard to get it back.
And here's the crazy thing. The craziest thing about the whole tariff situation is we really haven't felt the full brunt of it yet. In part because we had April 2nd, Liberation Day. What a genius bit of marketing. Yeah. And then that was paused a week later for 90 days. And in that 90 days, all these companies pulled forward all of their pre-tariff purchases. They brought in as much stuff as they possibly could. So the goods we've been buying for the better part of the past 6 months haven't really had substantial tariffs on them yet. The tariffs are there, but if you imported goods in that 90-day window from May, June, and July, right? So it's August, September, October. Hey, right around Christmas, we're starting to see some goods come in with tariffs. Do you remember what a meltdown the president had when Amazon threatened to say, "Here's the price and here's the tariff on it"? I mean, I think
when Amazon threatened to put a note on your purchase to
every price here, this is $72, of which $6.50 are tariffs.
He threatened their lives.
So the ironic thing is, the administration is insisting tariffs doesn't cause inflation, and then when the affordability hoax hurt them in the November elections, they want to roll back tariffs on things like coffee and imported.
He called the affordability hoax. You are not saying there is an
No, it's a hoax.
I know.
About inflation, I keep hearing it's a hoax. It's not real.
For you,
who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes?
For you, I believe it. You rich bastard.
So,
what have you not bought as a result of the economy? Where have you held back, Ritholtz? Nothing. You probably got. You know what?
I no longer import watches from overseas because I don't want to pay a 30% VIG on top of it. I mean,
the difference between you and I is that you buy all these expensive watches because you can, and I just want
I really don't. I haven't bought a watch in years.
I just want to buy, please. And I just want to buy.
I really haven't.
Okay. Well, I just want to buy a new Apple Watch, and I'm debating it because it's so much money.
Yeah, never. I don't want.
I'm the king of health over here. You're looking at.
It's got nothing to do with health. I don't want the endless notifications. When I unplug,
turn them off.
I want to be unplugged. I
don't have any notifications coming in on the watch, other than your body is a temple. Don't eat that.
Right. So, or you could just be disciplined, but hold that aside.
Affordability crisis. The affordability crisis is fake, and as we saw in November, you're talking about politics.
Right.
There was a real backlash to that.
But since you brought up wealth and affordability and inflation, I'll tell you what is real is the K-shaped economy. That if you're in the bottom half of the economic strata, if you're below the median household income of whatever it is, 82,000 and change, increases in prices are real because you don't have a buffer of cash sitting around that, it's going to cost that much. I mean, you go out to eat at a medium restaurant for a couple and it's over $100 and it's like, oh my God, that's kind of pricey. And you put down the credit card and out you go. If you can afford to do that, inflation is annoying. But you're not forced, if you're in the top half or the top quarter of the economic strata, you're not forced to make a difficult choice between what are we going to give up this month because so many things are more expensive. And it's not inflation. People misunderstand this. Inflation is the rate of change. How fast are prices going up. If inflation dropped to zero, everything is still much more expensive than it was pre-pandemic. It doesn't matter. Cars, real estate, houses, food, energy, all these things are pricier today than they were in 2019, even if inflation slows. And we're in a 2 to 3% range, which is normal historically, but we got spoiled by the post great financial crisis era where inflation was effectively zero.
Right.
And then the pandemic happened. And then the single largest fiscal stimulus since World War II came in. And that was what lit the spark of inflation.
Hey, you mentioned the financial crisis. You wrote a book basically about it, Bailout Nation. You are a real wonk when it comes. You speak about this issue. I never stopped thinking about it because I covered it. It's where we met, where you established, I think, a lot of credibility as well. And I just want to take a quick departure because I think about this a lot.
Mm-hmm.
The government created an investigation called the Financial Crisis Inquiry Commission, the FCIC.
I got the book is right there on the shelf behind me.
See, I told you, folks, he's a real. And so we talked about that a lot at the time. My recollection and my understanding is the Republicans on that committee insisted that the word deregulation and deregulation not be looked at, not be used. Am I right about that?
Yeah, there were a bunch of things they didn't want. And then the surrogates out in the real world said, this was really caused by poor people, by Black people,
Right.
buying houses they couldn't afford. And it's like, well, why did banks lend money to people? You mean you didn't do a credit check? You didn't do a history check? You didn't look at their ability to service the loan? Isn't that the responsibility of banks?
No.
I don't mean morally, I mean legally under.
We created a complex financial scheme that they all got rich and then they ran their banks out of business. But just to stay on this thread, so the Financial Crisis Inquiry Commission, they refused during their investigation to consider the actual root causes of the worst financial crisis of our lifetime and maybe of all of our lifetime. And then the same thing happens.
Hopefully.
The same thing happens with climate change. When looking at climate change, Republicans insist that they don't talk that the words greenhouse gases and everything that is the root of the problem. They don't look at those. They strike those words. It is the worst kind of censorship from government to strike the words and, more importantly, the root causes of the problems that we face, whether they be financial or environmental. I feel like there's something that we really need to talk more about, how Republicans refuse to talk about the root cause of problems to the point where they strike those words from the investigations into those issues. Do you want to say anything about that?
Sure. Two things. First, back to the financial crisis. There were three major legislative regulatory changes prior to that it's inarguable. I mean, you could try to argue, but you'll lose that those weren't significant factors that led up to the financial crisis. And by the way, it's rare that big, complicated events have a single cause. And in the book, in Bailout Nation, the centerfold here were the 7 or 9 things that all came together to cause a crisis. But on the regulatory side, first, you had the Commodities Future Modernization Act that carved out a special exemption for insurance products that were derivative-based that did not require reserve. So if you're writing life insurance, if you're writing homeowners or automobile insurance, you can use a actuarial table and say, here's how many people are going to die in any given year. We just know the math. Eventually, we have a 3% death rate in the country, which is fairly normal. So if we have 1 million policyholders, we should be prepared to pay out on 30,000 of those policies each year. And here's our reserve for that. Same thing with automobiles and houses. When we started doing, and by the way, this was driven by, of all companies, Enron, who was making a shit ton of money on derivative writing. When the Commodities Futures Monetization Act was passed, it allowed AIG to write all of these derivative policies, because they were effectively insurance policies, but with zero reserve. And AIG ended up writing $3 trillion worth of policy. So if your models are off by 1%, right, that's still $30 billion of losses you're going to have. And that's enough to bankrupt just about any financial company
And
in
it
the
did.
world.
AIG
And it did, right. So that's number one.
Dick Fold. Isn't
Yeah,
that
Lehman
the AIG
Brothers.
executive? Oh, that's Lehman Brothers. Sorry,
Right.
I thought he was the AIG executive who got punched in the face by while on a treadmill at the gym. Anyway, so stay on the target with it. You're listing
So
the
the other thing was the repeal of Glass-Steagall, and what
right.
Glass-Steagall had done. So this didn't cause the crisis, but it let it get much bigger. Glass-Steagall used to say, "Hey, our FDIC banks are over here, our speculative Wall Street banks are over there, and never the twain shall meet." The repeal of Glass-Steagall, which kind of happens in the sort of extra legal way before the legislation was passed. I think it was the Graham Leach-Biley Act
Widely, yeah.
Repealed Glass-Steagall.
Yep.
And so basically it allowed banks like Citibank and Wells Fargo and Wachovia and go down the list, and how many banks
And that was
blew up, Washington Mutual. It allowed them to speculate and essentially turn into giant hedge fund casinos. And so when everybody else was getting rich in the early 2000s speculating on housing, they jumped in. And that's why the FDIC reserve fund ran all the way down. And that's why so many of these banks had to be rescued, both banks and brokers.
Always worth mentioning here that it was Clinton who was the Democratic president.
Yep.
A very conservative capitalist Treasury Secretary named Robert Rubin. And when they passed that,
you're forgetting one other person, the person who replaced Rubin, one recently banned for life, Larry Summers.
Larry Summers.
Right. The American Economic Association banned him for life because of his role with Jeffrey Epstein.
They should have banned him for life because of his role in advisement as Treasury Secretary for both Clinton and later on Obama, I believe. But so it's worth mentioning that when they repealed Glass-Steagall and that whatever it was called act,
Rubin,
Byron Dorgan, senator from South Dakota, stood on the Senate floor and he said, this is going to come back in about 10 years or so. You can find the New York Times article of them quoting him. And it's exactly what happened. You're very good in your most recent piece over the big picture to look back at you and other analysts who said, if we do this, this is going to happen. That's where people get their credibility. And I think that really matters in today's media environment, which is why I'm belaboring these points and trying to make sure everybody understands yours and to some extent mine for having you here. But it's important that Byron Dorgan and others like Robert Reich predicted this would happen as a result of getting rid of Glass-Steagall, and it did. So you haven't gotten to the third cause, I don't think.
Well, by the way, Rubin, after repealing Glass-Steagall, which allowed the Travelers Citibank merger to take place, later becomes chairman of Citibank, which you would think would violate every ethic and conflict rule there is, and yet somehow that managed to happen. I don't remember where I was going with the third one. I got derailed with Citibank, but the third one, Chairman Alan Greenspan as head of the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is responsible for all manner of bank regulation. And there was a run of these non-bank lenders that were cranking out these, 228, interest only, no background check, liar loans. And Greenspan said, we don't need to regulate these or oversee these. The market will take care of it. And he was technically correct. All those banks went out of business. All those non-banks went out of business. But, we had 3 million foreclosures and, $1 trillion rescue. So, yeah, the market eventually cleaned it up. So one was a repeal of legislation. One was new legislation. And the third was repeal of regulation, new deregulation. And the third was refusal to regulate, even though they had the authority and the responsibility. So those three factors were giant. There were a lot of other factors. 0% interest rate, again.
Credit agency corruption.
Right. I mean, it was endless. Like if I were to rewrite that book, I probably have another dozen
Interesting.
blamees for who's responsible. We really
Well,
didn't know at the time how significant MERS was. That's the mortgage electronic registration system, which is another, technically extra legal, no legislation that authorized them to run normally you get a mortgage and it gets filed in the local town. But when you're securitizing these, when you're slicing them and dicing them, no one can keep up with it. So let's set up an electronic system to track this. P.S. That system did a horrible job.
Yeah.
And that's how you ended up with people with no mortgages getting foreclosed on.
Right,
Like,
right.
that's how screwed up that became.
I want to talk about it forever. It's important that people understand that history right there, because there are a whole bunch of people who are rewriting history, constantly creating conspiracies. And a lot of that stuff, I think, most importantly, it destroys the credibility of people who have it, and it gives credibility to people who don't have it, like Peter, what's his name, Schweitzer, and all these other kind of libertarian, weird free market gold buggeries that want to get rid of the Fed.
But by the way, but let me just interrupt you a second. It's ironic that the president wants to take a piece of Intel and wants to take a piece of all these companies, and his party colleagues are going along with it.
Right.
My suggestion during the financial crisis was, if we're going to bail out these companies that are otherwise a zero, well, let's have the taxpayer take 30-40% of these companies. And when we put them through bankruptcy, fix them up, and then bring them public again, the public will be made whole for their multi-trillion-dollar bailout. That's the time to do it. Hey, here's the deal. We own half of you. Alternatively, you're a zero. How do you feel about that? That should have been done, and it wasn't done then.
So socializing the risk and privatizing the profits is what happens so often in this country, right? When these industries or individual companies commit these types of fraudulent practices, let's just say, that screw over a whole bunch of people. But I just coming back, thinking about the bailouts and thinking about how much money government approved to bail out these banks or to save, for example, General Motors. I think it's fair to look at those as investments into the future of the financial system or the future of the automobile industry, which a lot of people will say is a pretty necessary thing to have for a successful, rich country, an automobile industry. But compare and contrast that to $12 billion in bailouts to farmers. That's not an investment. I guess it keeps the farmer from blowing his head off and keeps his farm there for next year, but the food rotted. It didn't get sold. That seems like an easier thing for people to understand. Compare and contrast the farm bailouts that were needed because of a self-inflicted wound of a trade war that this stupid fucking Uncle Scam started, to the bailouts of the past.
So we're putting tariffs on farm on imports. So naturally, other countries reciprocate. China, in particular, is a giant buyer, at least was, of our soybeans. And then we're putting tariffs on companies like GM and Ford and Caterpillar and John Deere, and making it more challenging for them. By the way, all those companies stocks, which all our clients own as part of the S&P 500, they've all done really well since that Supreme Court decision, because the assumption is, once this Supreme Court hearing, we're waiting for the decision. The assumption was once these companies have the tariffs off their back, their sales will do much better. And P.S., companies like Costco and others have sued the government.
Yeah, what's that?
So, because they're entitled to a refund.
Am I going to get money? I'm a Costco member in good standing.
Well, Costco will get the refund. You as a consumer,
I think they're going to pass it along to me in a form of lined pants and a huge crate of potatoes,
or lower prices, arguably. But you're seeing lots of companies do this. It's kind of fascinating that a bunch of companies were kind of chicken shit about doing this. They were afraid to do it because they're all terrified of the president's wrath. Costco was kind of like, yeah, we're bigger than you.
Yeah.
You can come after us. We don't give a shit.
That's why I'm a member.
They happen to be, by the way, the Costco story, if you ever go out and read it, it's an unbelievable story how that company even came to exist. It's really fascinating. Talk about history. But since we're talking about tariffs and we're talking about where we are today.
And bailouts.
$12 billion to the farmer. I am always just look. My whole career is spent focused on human decision making and where it goes awry. That was the whole second book. Um, uh, Quick plug: How Not to Invest. Really, the focus is why do people make bad decisions? What leads us? What is in our DNA that leads us to not do well, either in stocks or in our personal life or in politics or in consumption? We make a whole lot of really bad decisions. I'm astonished that the farmers, and I really shouldn't be, we went through this in the first Trump
won.
term, and there were all sorts of complaints. There was a bailout of farmers for that back then.
Yep.
There were complaints that markets were lost permanently. And then when Trump 2 comes along, they were like, yeah, give me some more of that.
Right.
So I don't think we should bail out the farmers.
I said that last night at our hangout.
I'm a fan of farmers. I'm
Me
an
too. I grew up
investor
on them.
into farmland.
Yes.
But I think that at a certain point, you have to take responsibility. You have to own your own bad decisions. And if that means that you're going to run at a loss for a couple of years, well, maybe be more intelligent. Don't vote against your own interest. By the way, that's the genius of American politics, is how many people are convinced to vote against their own interest. And we're now seeing this with the Obamacare extensions,
Healthcare. Yep.
and which is going to hurt the red states
it's going
more
to
than the blue
and
states.
so many people on Medicaid and so many people on independent contractors and entrepreneurs on the exchanges as well. But I would just take it a little further than I don't feel bad for the farmers who voted for.
I feel bad for them, and I want them to make better decisions.
I'm saying I would take it further in that if you made a bad decision with your vote, I will forgive you if you right now stand up, walk out to a microphone, join in other farmers and say, I was wrong to vote for this man, or at least say this policy has destroyed. I feel like they're not loud enough. I feel like the few farmers who will speak out are so overbooked on MSNBC. Like they all need to join together and speak out, whether or not they voted for him or against him. I would like to hear from more of them, and I feel like I'm not. So moving on, there's two other things.
It's called MS Now.
Forgive me.
It's no longer MSNBC.
Forgive me. MS Now.
Yeah.
MS. I can't believe he hasn't come up with a terrible name for that. MS Cow. If you're listening to. Okay, I want to talk to you about AI. I want to talk to you about inflation. First, AI. There has been this theory that there was an AI bubble, and a lot of concern with investors and others about that. Recently, it seems to have. There seems to have been something that's changed that's caused a little more calmness around the AI bubble, but still a lot of smart people are talking about comparing it to the dot-com bubble of the late 90s, and that, yes, it hasn't happened, but it will happen. It's just a little further down the road. Seemingly, markets have reacted and seem comfortable. What is going on? AI bubble time.
So first, Time Magazine Man of the Year is the people behind AI. Historically, by the time it makes it to the cover of Time, the run is over. And famously, December '99, they put Jeff Bezos on the cover. About 10, and that was right before a 88% crash in the stock. They did something similar with Mark Zuckerberg a decade later. At the time, Facebook was widely liked, and now he's become a pariah and as thought of as like an evil oligarch. So the Time Magazine cover curse is still alive and well. And go back to, I want to say 06 or 07. I'm not sure if it was Time or Newsweek. Why we love houses right before that crash. So I'm not fully in the bubble camp. I'm in the boom and bust camp, which is a little more. You want to look at a bubble, look at NFTs. Do you remember 5 years ago, NFTs one sold for, the Beeple collection sold for $69 million. I forgot the name of the other one, sold for $90 million. And then there's a
NFT stands for non-fungible token, a unique digital.
Remember Board Ape Yacht Club, and a whole bunch of wacky stuff. $50 billion worth of those tokens were purchased. Today, they're worth 1% of that. That's a true bubble. Here's something that very akin to the Dutch tulip bubble from centuries ago. Here's something of arguably zero intrinsic value that's run up to crazy prices and then came crashing back down. So let's compare AI to the internet. And if you remember back in the day, there were all these quote unquote internet companies, and there were pets.com and Juniper Networks and Metro Media Fiber and all these other companies. And starting in around March 2000, all these companies crashed. Many went out of business. A lot of them fell 70, 80, 90%. That was pretty much a full on bubble. Once we stopped caring about revenues and profits and started caring about clicks and eyeballs, like we became untethered from why people put money into the stock market. And that was a legitimate complaint. Wait, they have no revenues. It's a wisp of an idea and it's going public. And that happened a lot. P.S. You can make an argument that, hey, pets.com was way ahead of its time. And now Chewy is the modern version of that. It's very successful. It's very, I believe it's profitable. It's a fast growing online pet supply, pet goods supply stuff. So some of the stuff was just ahead of its time. Fast forward to now, and we're looking at AI, and you have lots and lots of companies booking hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. So it's NVIDIA and it's Amazon Web Services and it's Microsoft, and it's go down, the list of companies that are in this space. Some people use the phrase hyperscalers. I can't tell you which of these companies are going to be the winner, but I can tell you that at a certain point in the future, there will be a clear delineation of the early companies who were winners and who were losers. Now, roll back a quarter century to the internet and the .com.
Yeah.
We don't mention internet companies anymore because every company is an internet company. We all use email. We all have a website. We all use Slack or Teams or Google Meet or whatever it is, or Zoom. Like the internet is a key part of what every business does. And I don't think there's much argument that it doesn't make us more productive, more efficient, more profitable. And so the question of, is AI a bubble, is almost the wrong question. The right question is, forget the Magnificent Seven. Look at the rest of the 493 in the S&P 500. Will the deployment of artificial intelligence make those companies more efficient, more productive, more profitable? And the chief economist at Vanguard, a guy named Joe Davis, wrote a white paper back in 2019, which is now a book, just came out this year, that basically looks at 100 years of technological innovation. And they found that technological innovation takes place in two phases. The first phase are the companies that are the pick and shovel companies, the actual builders of the underlying infrastructure. And there's a boom and bust in that. Think back to every new tech company. How many computer companies were there?
Right.
Gateway and CompuWhatever, whatever. And there were hundreds of them, and now you're down to 3 or 4 companies left. And the same thing happened with radio and TV and automobiles, and go down the list. Every major industrial or technological innovation leads to a land rush, and then eventually there's the fallout.
Data centers.
Right. So now we don't know who the big one. Maybe it's NVIDIA, maybe it's AMD, maybe it's Intel, maybe it's Qualcomm, maybe it's Oracle. I could give you a list of 30 companies, and I have no idea which one of them are winners or losers. Arguably, NVIDIA is, or not really arguably, NVIDIA is clearly the front runner today, but go back and look at all these other industries. Very often the front runner falters. They get locked into wherever they are. And some kid who's in high school today, when 8 years from now, when he graduates Stanford and launches his or her new company, they're going to be able to do what NVIDIA does for 100th of the price, twice the efficiency. And now all of a sudden, robots everywhere, intelligent robots everywhere. So So, it's really tough to guess who the winners are today. But the second phase, as we saw with the internet, is when everybody adopts this. By the way, this isn't all sunshine and roses. There are positives and negatives. If you look at the unemployment rate for under 30 years old, it's double the national unemployment rate. So there's a clear sense that artificial intelligence is replacing entry level workers, especially white collar workers. And the question is, how do you become a mid level worker if you're not hired or trained
Right.
as an entry level worker? So there's definitely some downside here, but the expectation is this is going to have a net positive impact on corporate America, for better or worse.
Great explanation. Finally, I want to get to this piece that you have over at Ritholtz.com, the big picture blog, where you continue to post your brilliant observations, analysis, insights, and hyperlinks. It's titled, "Whose Inflation Is This?" An attempt to explain responsibility. And you do a little bit of a deep dive into where this started. You go back to the pandemic. You also reference a conversation you had with someone that you brought on your platform, and this is what I was talking about earlier. Professor Jeremy Siegel basically predicted a lot of this back in May 2020 with you. And why are you bringing this up now? You say because this whole question of affordability is not a hoax, as Uncle Scam said. Take it from there. What do you want to tell us?
Sure. So first of all, the president during the pandemic in 2020 was presented with a terrible choice between a rock and a hard place, and that choice is essentially: do
As
we
was
do?
every other world leader.
That's right. Do
Because
we
of the
do
pandemic.
nothing and let unemployment run up to 10, 12, 15%? Or do we do a giant fiscal stimulus and run the risk that inflation runs up to 9, 11, 14%, whatever the choices are? And listen, nobody likes higher prices, but you at least can navigate through it. If you're unemployed, it's a disaster. You have to worry about how you're going to pay the rent, how you're going to put food on the table, how you're going to get your kids, because we get all our health care through our work in this country. How, if my kid needs a surgery, what happens here? And so unemployment is a much worse option. And I think everybody pretty much agrees with that. So to this president's credit, in 2020, they passed the single largest fiscal stimulus as a percentage of GDP since World War II. And that prevented unemployment from being, as it turned out, by the way, John Maynard Keynes, who talked about fiscal stimulus a century earlier, again, time and again, he's proven right. When there is a substantial downturn in the economy, the government should temporarily step in and replace the demand that used to come from households and businesses with some fiscal stimulus. I mean, it's just the playbook. We did not do that after the financial crisis. I think that was purposeful and was trying to, submarine Obama, but that's just my
Wow,
personal
you
opinion.
think?
Yeah,
I mean, it was,
I mean, I said that to a bunch of people,
yeah.
including
Everybody knew that. I mean, glad that you said
no,
it.
when I said that in 2010 and 11 to a bunch of people, including a Nobel laureate at the table, oh, no, congressmen and senators are terrible, but even they wouldn't do that. There was a general consensus. Gee, that's you're not a conspiracy theory. That sounds a little conspiratorial. I'm like, it's not a secret. Here's what they've done in the past, and here's what they're doing now. They are failing to step up with an appropriate fiscal stimulus. And the results were a long, slow recovery, subpar recovery in terms of job creation, wage gains, consumer spending, primarily due to a lack of a fiscal stimulus. Fast forward to March 2020, massive fiscal stimulus. And what happens? The most robust recovery in the world. Everybody else was lagging us. A giant inflationary surge, which, look, Professor Jeremy Siegel of the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania is a highly regarded expert on markets and the economy. He wrote the book Stocks for the Long Run, which is, I don't know, it's like 8th print edition, and highly, highly regarded professor, said, I'll give you the quote. First, we're going to have this is May 2020. We're going to have a huge spending boom next year. And I think for the first time, and I know this is a sharp minority view here, for the first time in over 2 decades, we're going to see inflation. And people were shocked at that. So I pressed him on it. And the answer was, with this liquidity in the economy, I expect moderate inflation. I'm not talking about hyperinflation. I'm nowhere near that. I expect inflation to run up next year or two to 2, 3, 4, 5%, and maybe run again in 2022 the same way. So cumulatively, I expect inflation to go up 10, 12% over the next few years. That is exactly what happened. And what's astonishing is how nobody holds this president accountable for his role in it. And I wrote a piece a year or two later, causes of inflation 1 to 15. And I blame the pandemic, obviously, and Congress and Biden and Trump and greedflation and the consumer and all these other factors that drove inflation. But I'm amazed that this president has skated away from any responsibility for the giant inflation surge we saw pretty much starting in late 2020 and right through 21 and 22. He left a ticking time bomb for Biden with this. And again, an intelligent observer saw this in May, 2 months after the first CARES Act was passed. Then the second CARES Act was passed by Trump. Then the third CARES Act was passed by Biden. I don't exonerate Biden. I find him responsible also. And by the way, the choice to say, I would rather have inflation over high inflation over high unemployment, because high inflation is temporary and high unemployment leaves a permanent mark and has a giant impact on the economy. That was the least bad choice. You had 2 bad options. That was the less bad option. So it's not like, oh, he made a terrible mistake. He made a difficult choice, and I think he made the right choice. What I'm kind of flummoxed by is how nobody has said, this affordability hoax is in large part traces back to the correct choice you made in 2020, but please understand your role in it. This isn't a hoax, it's real, and you're one of the factors that drove it.
That's such a very important point to remind people about. I'm so glad I'll share that post. Everybody should go read that post at the big picture. But I do think, I agree with you that he skated away from it so far. But I think that his time is coming. Retribution on this issue. When Americans just don't see things going down, they're always going to blame the people in office, and that does break the fever to a certain extent of the cult.
Worse than blaming people in office, when you say, I'll bring prices down day one, it's easy. I'll end the war in Ukraine day one, it's easy.
Right.
All the promises that were made,
even if you say, well, the thing is, what's fascinating, the audacity of this man and the people that support him in right-wing media, especially, that he just says a thing happened that didn't happen. Prices are the lowest, the economy is the best, and I solved the wars. You're like, I don't think that your grandmother didn't die. No, she's dead. Grandma died. She didn't not die. She's dead. What are you talking about? How are you convincing me that she's back? No, she's doing good. She's just at the house. No, I'm pretty sure she's dead. Nope, she's alive. Why are you lying?
I'm a big fan of the quote, I can't hear what you're saying because what you do speaks so loudly. And so when you look at whether, I don't pay close attention to approval polls because we know polling has been so flawed. But we do see what the election results were. We do see, look, Miami hasn't had a Democratic mayor in 30 years.
They just elected a Democratic socialist.
As did New York City. New York City always elects Democrats, but a Democratic socialist who, by the way, I don't really understand this bromance between him and Trump, between Dami and Trump. But hey, if it keeps the federal tax dollars flowing to New York, I'm okay with it.
The issue is very simple, and sometimes you're too smart, but I'm not. And I see these things where sometimes other people don't, because
Two guys from Queens.
No, it's simply, and this is true. Donald Trump has always liked and been impressed with popular people and he gravitates towards them. So
Yep.
it's like sometimes people will say he's not racist because he was friends with Don King. No, he was friends with Don King because of who Don King was, is a piece of shit, by the way. And the same is true of all of these other famous people that he's
Killed a man, didn't he? If I remember
yeah, he's not a
correctly.
good guy, but he just screwed over Mike Tyson. But the bottom line is he gravitates towards anybody who's hot right now. And Mamdani was very hot and very likable and very charming, and that's all you need to know. That's why.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. But a lot of this just comes back to
he wants to get some of that secret sauce. What's that guy doing? I got affordability. That's working. I'll try that. Now he's saying
he used affordability.
It worked for him for like a day and a half. He stopped using it.
He used it to get elected. He constantly
never used the word. He never used that word.
He didn't say the word affordability, but he talked about high prices and he talked about inflation
and pencils. Did you hear him say at a rally? He said, maybe you're not going to be able to get 2 pencils. Do you know how fucking unbelievably idiotic that's the weirdest? You could say anything. You
don't need 27 dolls. You just need 2 or 3 dolls.
But think about it for 1 second. Who is budgeting? People are budgeting on toys, if you want to call them dolls. People do say, can I afford these toys for my kids this year? But nobody says, can I get these pencils? Nobody's using pencils.
I was going to say, who uses pencils? Everybody's on
people, but even you could be the poorest artist or writer in the world, and you could find pencils. You could find them somewhere.
They're free. You walk into various stores. They're right there in a cup.
You'd be ridiculed for using it. What are you doing? What are you using a pencil for? What is a Scantron test?
Every time I have to sign my name on a piece of paper, like I sign my name, and I'm like, God, I can't remember the last time I picked up a pen. And look how terrible my handwriting is. I just don't. Who does that?
If people can't afford a couple of quills.
But can I tell you, you're pointing to something really important, which is why has over the past decade or two, this country become ruled by geriatrics? And listen, my dotage is not too far off in the future. I can see when I'm going to be just lying at home and drooling. Like, that's not that far off. But I don't understand why we keep electing 80-year-olds.
You know why?
Why?
Moving on.
I think at a certain point, the country has to say, and I don't care it's left or right. It could be Pelosi and Schumer and all the people on the right who are crypt keepers, but there's just no reason. And people are saying, oh, Mamdani is so young. Yeah, I'd rather have somebody thinking about the future than somebody who's
always
burial plots.
Yes, always. So if you really care, if you really want to be kind of look at people's self-interest, young people care about the future a lot more than old people. All right. So that's the thing I want to ask you, if you get time, is does anybody in your world look at, or I guess in economics and immigration, the economic effect? I talk a lot about the human rights and obviously horribly morally corrupt acts of deporting people the way they are and snatch industry. But the economic impact, I know there is already an economic impact of what this means for all of the industries and all of the places. I remember when I interviewed Anthony Bourdain years ago, and he said, and I remember because the clip kind of went viral, he's like, if you deported every person working in a restaurant in New York City, you'd have no restaurants open. And I'm wondering about the economic effect of these immigration crackdowns, because whether or not they're being deported, there's a chilling effect on undocumented people going to work at their landscaping job, at their restaurant job, etc. What are your how much do you pay attention to the economic effect of these primitive immigration deportations, this medieval craziness?
So first off, I do a quarterly call for clients, and I always save one slide for the end, which is, just something to think about. And what's fascinating, and this is according to a conservative right-wing group, the American Enterprise Institute,
AEI,
2025 is going to be the first time ever that the U.S. in its history will see a population decrease. Their forecast is down about 500,000. There's a handful of other people that have done these sort of forecasts. There's a CBO projection that has us more or less at a flat this year. But when you look at the history of America, this has never happened before. And so it's been pretty, it's an element. So when you look at all the jobs that are hard to fill, when you look at AI stepping into a lot of white collar jobs, a big part of this is because there simply aren't enough bodies there. And these aren't foreigners taking jobs that Americans want. These are the like least desirable entry level jobs
Right.
in restaurants, on farms, in nursing. By the way, if we stop immigration as the oldest generation continues to age out, no, there's not going to be enough healthcare workers to take care of these folks. Most of those people are coming primarily legally from overseas and from lots of the Caribbean and South America. And, to stop that is really cutting off our nose to spite our face. It's astonishing. It would be one thing if there were like lots of Americans clamoring for these jobs and saying, hey, we can't compete with these people who take lower wages. That's not what the economic situation. The economic situation is either you hire an immigrant for this job or that position goes unfilled.
I would just like to wrap it all up by naming, I think, 4 net effects that this administration has done that will hurt the economy, working our way backward: immigration, tariff and trade war. I think also the lack of investment into renewable energy and building factories and building the future of energy and technology. Those are 3 things. But also, and finally, and maybe more importantly, the fact that people's healthcare prices, they're always going to go up, by the way. I think we should, because we're not fixing the system.
Yeah, but it's been 9% a year for forever. That's way above inflation.
And now it's going to, in some people's premiums are going to double. The net
Double
effect
and triple, yeah.
those 4 policies, either what they did or did not do about trying to fix it, I don't know how it doesn't end up in a pretty bad 26, 27. I don't know.
So the fascinating thing is, I heard the president say he inherited a mess from the Biden administration. He inherited an economy that was so robust that all of these self-inflicted wounds have not yet caused a recession. That's how strong the economy was that he inherited, that it could take all these body blows and it's still moving along. At a certain point, all these little injuries, all these little wounds, you just start to bleed out and eventually the economy is going to stumble. That's the nature of this. You can't just persistently damage the way the economy works. You can't hurt the consumer. You can't hurt manufacturers. You can't hurt retailers and farmers without eventually the economy taking a hit. And I don't see a recession in the next quarter, probably not even the first half of the year. And it's an election year. So historically, presidents have a tendency to try and get as much stimulus into the economy because it's still the economy, stupid. People still vote on the economy. But one very possible scenario is that by the end of the summer, or maybe sooner, we're in a modest downturn, not a full-on disaster, just we go from +2, +3% growth to -1% growth. And that has significant ramifications for the November elections. We know if the elections were held today, this would be a 20, 25, 30 seat swing in the House, even with all the redistricting nonsense. It's to see a close battle in Tennessee, to see a Democratic victory in a city like Miami that has been anti-Democrat for 30, 40 years, really is telling you that a lot of the population didn't vote for this. They wanted, hey, we want to end the wars and we want to see prices come down. And it was a bait and switch. We got something completely different. I am not I'm not a fan of letting people walk away from their responsibility when they make a decision. I think you need to hold people accountable. And And I think you're starting to see the electorate say, ho, 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 you ran on high prices and bringing them down. What is all this craziness?
Really appreciate all that. Last question. I got one more. I just thought of it, which is about interest rates and the Fed and their recent moves. And more importantly, how much are people in your world looking at the fact that he is going to get rid of Jerome Powell and potentially replace him with Ebenezer Scrooge or a bag of gold coins that are actually just chocolate?
So Jerome Powell's term ends in the spring, and that's fairly, all that's expected. He hasn't announced whether once he steps down as chairman, whether he's going to stay as a Fed governor. But I think the takeaway is there is a reason why we have an independent Fed, and the reason is if you left it to the president, they would give you 0% interest rate. Everybody would go have a big party, and then you'd have another uncontrollable surge of inflation. So this is why we want the Federal Reserve to be independent. We want the Department of Justice to be independent. We want the FTC to be independent. We want the CDC to be independent. And I think the big takeaway from this White House is we have a system that's literally distributed power, a series of checks and balances. We don't want all this power in one person's hands because, as we've seen, they make decisions that help for the moment, but then kind of leave a ticking time bomb. We haven't talked about, Biden got the blame for that disastrous Afghanistan pullout. There's a fair argument to be made. His hands were tied, and that was a little present left for him.
Right.
By the previous president. It wasn't
negotiated it. Yes.
Right. It was Trump's timeline. It was
the Taliban. He fucking invited the Taliban to Camp David. If Obama or Biden had done that, they would have gone absolutely nuts having them in there.
To be fair, Obama did once wear a beige suit in the Oval Office, and
and he once said that a cop behaved poorly.
That's true. So it's even Steve. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, man. So interest rates is going to be fine. Everything's going to be fine.
The best thing about the U.S. economy is it's somewhat self-correcting, and when we have these giant mistakes, it eventually flushes itself out. The only question is how much damage gets done between now and then.
Right.
And that's a big question. That's a real question.
Yeah. Well, we'll keep talking about it to get the answers. Barry Ritholtz, always a pleasure. Thank you for spending a full hour with us today.
My pleasure.
Everybody go buy your book. Everybody should go buy your book.
How Not to Invest. It's out there. It got some really good reviews on Amazon. I'm really pleased with how it's been doing. So it's been fun talking about it because I love to talk about human decision making and why we're not great at it.
The best review is from my father. My dad said it's one of the best books he's ever read on finance.
Really?
Yeah. He says it's actually a better review. I should have him write it down, but he basically is like, if everybody would just read this book, it would be a lot easier for any investor because these rules have always been pretty consistent, and Barry's just reminding us of them and what we've learned. It's not, particularly hard to figure out, yet no one seemed to be able to do it the way you did it.
So since this is the end of a podcast and nobody will hear it, I'll confess to a murder right here. The book really isn't about investing. It's really about
to invest.
It's really not about finance or money. It's about decision making, and it doesn't matter what field it is. You have to be more thoughtful and circumspect about who you listen to, what you read.
Will it help will how to invest? Will how not to invest your book? Will it help your marriage? What about your personal health?
If you make better, more thoughtful decisions, sure.
And your personal health, will it affect your physical health?
Again, are you going to go to McDonald's? Or are you going to have something healthy? It's about good decision making, no matter what the subject is.
Are you eating enough protein?
Up until Thanksgiving, almost only protein, and now I've been on a holiday jag of junk food and garbage. A friend of mine has a chart showing everybody's weight over the course of the year. Thanksgiving to New Year's is where America puts on the most amount of weight throughout the year.
as a result of knowing that, I've picked this time to be on my best behavior,
Really?
and I've only been invited to one holiday party, so I'm not too
Right.
worried about it. You probably get invited to a lot of holiday parties. How many? How many? I
I,
think that, yeah.
I,
By the way, I think you should evaluate your net worth, your personal net worth, on how many holiday parties you at least get invited to. Not how many you go. I'm not saying you have to
I
go.
I don't really go to many of those.
How many you get invited to?
I don't know. I say no to most of them, so I don't pay
Several,
attention.
though, but several you would
More
say.
than one, yes.
No, so two.
A bunch, yeah, a bunch. I mean, most of those, by the way, most business holiday parties are business. It's not fun, and I don't need to stand around in the dark with bad music playing,
Did you know?
drinking warm beer while someone sells me on a shitty mutual fund.
I think
I could skip that.
I think I've told you I'm in a relationship with a man in Australia. Have I told you that?
No, you got catfished.
No, we've been friends forever, and we talk every day. We're codependent.
Get out,
Yeah,
really?
yeah. Like yes, he's pretty much my best friend, and for a lot of anyway.
When was the last time you physically? Have you ever physically met him?
Yeah, of course. We hung out, and when he lived in New York, that's how we met when we were in our early
And when
20s.
did he move to Australia?
He moved back to Australia because he's Australian.
Okay.
Yeah. And I saw him 2 summers ago. I went down there, but
Right.
he just told me yesterday that they like basically shut down for a month because it's their summer now, you
Right.
know, and so they get but they like everybody pretty much stops working this week until the end of January or something.
So it's like Europe in August.
Yeah, but I didn't
entire
know
continent is closed.
didn't
And I
know
will
what else.
tell you, I have noticed over the past decade or two that has started to take place in the US more and more.
Well,
It
yeah,
used to be
but
summer Fridays where
yeah.
like a lot of people were closed. And then by the time you get to August, it's just a lot of, hey, I'll check in on Tuesday, but
Right. I
don't
think
count on
it
me.
does happen a lot in August, but it's interesting to point out, I suppose, in the Southern Hemisphere or in Australia, this is their summer. And so they take off. It's just also a really interesting, good time to take off because it's the holidays.
Right.
For us, between Thanksgiving and New Year's, what gets done, either a lot, depending on your industry, or not a lot, I suppose.
Right. So we were in Miami last week.
Cram it all in.
We were in Miami last week, and what's always funny is Christmas in a warm region where you see like the lights
Yeah.
on palm tree. It just looks so wrong. Santa is from the North Pole, not from Miami Beach, and so it's always weird and odd seeing that. It's also from the airport to the beach. I turn to my wife and I go, it's a shame all of this is going to be underwater in a few decades. It's like you're looking around and it's like, Jesus, everything is at sea level. Like they're talking about a $35 billion plan to raise the shoreline of New York City 25 feet. Like that's what they're doing in New York.
You need a seawall.
And in Florida, it's like, no, we're all good.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Do you, last question, I said that 4 times. Do you feel, I've been asking all my non-Christian, non-Christmas people, my understanding is that you're Jewish, you're raised Jewish. Do you feel like you missed out on Christmas morning and the feeling that a child gets seeing all those presents, if they're lucky enough to be privileged and their parents get them a bunch of presents? Do you feel like you missed out? Did you when you were growing up?
When I was younger, for sure, as a kid, it's like I can't. And Hanukkah with 8 crazy nights of shitty little presents doesn't compare.
Yeah.
But I will tell you that once you're out of your 20s, that you completely fades because
but I'm saying I still compare levels of excitement to Christmas morning in my life. And I don't know what you have like that from your child.
So when I'm married 100 years now, when my wife first moved into my apartment in the city, the only piece of furniture she brought was this big glass dining room table. And heading into Hanukkah, back then we were young, we were broke, we didn't have a lot of money. We started putting little gift wrap presents on the table.
There you go.
Not like a tree, but so all of this pile of presents started to grow, and
they all built into a crucifix.
Well, what happened is as we got closer to Hanukkah, it's like, and the Jews use a lunar calendar, so it's not like December 25th every year. Some years Hanukkah is like November. Some years it's December. It's all over the place. Hey, do we really want to open these presents? It's not even Thanksgiving yet.
Right.
So we rolled. Well, let's wait till the end of Hanukkah. And then the end of Hanukkah, it's like, well, let's wait till Thanksgiving. And after Thanksgiving, it was like, gee, you know, everybody gets to have a religion. And I joke about friends, Jews in Connecticut who celebrate Christmas.
Yeah.
Like pick you get any religion in the world, pick one.
Yeah.
And so if you want to be Jewish, great. If you want to celebrate Christmas, great. But Jewish Christmas trees are a non-starter for me.
Oh,
so when we were trying to scratch our head and figure out what to do, I think it was me who came up with the idea. Hey, why don't we open our presents on New Year's Eve? And we've been doing that since we've been engaged. Oh. And so our big celebration is so New Year's, you know this. New Year's Eve is amateur night. Like I don't need to go to a party or pay double to go to a restaurant with a bunch of strangers. So we go to an early dinner. We're home, pop a bottle of champagne, and open our presents. And that's my New Year's Eve. That's my Christmas day.
Do you celebrate Christ's birth at some point? Does someone say something about the Lord?
No, nobody talks about that. It's usually the conversation is, ooh, how did you know I wanted that? Or, oh, I bought this for myself 3 months ago and didn't tell you about it because it was expensive, sort of shit. So there was that. And there's always I ordered this in September and I just got an email. It won't be here till
How many of the presents your wife gets were bought for you by you? And then you're like, I don't want this. And then you
zero. No, listen. I know what she likes. I know what the sort of
another man's watch.
Not a man's watch, a woman's watch. Last year,
why do you keep getting me?
Got her a 1950 Rolex, this tiny little Rolex that I hunted down in Japan. It was shockingly reasonable. I mean, like $1,000, not like a crazy watch.
In years earlier, but you just bought a watch a year ago. You did. You said you hadn't. You said you haven't bought a watch in years.
When was the last watch I got? The last watch I got was. Oh no, I didn't buy any watches in 2025.
Oh, honey, a wallet with the letters initials BR embroidered. I think for you.
So here's the thing about watches, and this will be the last thing I'll say.
Oh, I'm gonna just end it.
Nobody needs a mechanical watch. It's absolutely a holy. Yeah, just as nobody needs a V8 with a stick shift. Nobody needs that. But the reason you do things like that is you appreciate the craftsmanship and you appreciate the throwback to a different era. Like we all have one of these. I don't need a goddamn Apple Watch on my wrist. I don't want to see my emails. I don't want to see notifications.
You need to reach your standing goal and things like that. And also, you guys just got a coal-fired bread oven, I believe, right? Because speaking of throwbacks, a coal-fired bread.
No, it's an Uni pizza oven, and that's 3 years old.
Forgive me. I thought you got
and it works off of gas. It's actually relatively clean.
To a coal delivery service is my.
That's right. With the milkman leaves the milk, and the guy fills up the coal box, so we can throw it into the furnace. And that's why we have black soot coming out of the roof of the house.
Soot. Ritholtz, everybody, go check out the big picture. Get the book, How Not to Invest Right Now. Thank you very much for joining me. Thank you for everybody joining us live, and go subscribe. Bye-bye.